Happy April and welcome back for chapter 11 of Malcolm at Midnight. The biggest thing that happened to remember from yesterday is the Academy now knows that Malcolm is a rat. Today's chapter is called A Small Blue Box. Malcolm waited in his cage, licking off all that gristly gum. He waited and waited. The sun came up Sunday morning, then it grew dark and dim Sunday night. The whole time Malcolm waited, that knot in his stomach grew. It was like there were two shoelaces. One was the worry about Aggie, alone and cold out there, maybe even hurt, and the other was Malcolm's lie, his breaking of the Academy bylaws. In short, his rattiness. These two laces snarled and grew and tightened inside him until Malcolm couldn't sleep. He couldn't sip his antibacterial water. He couldn't even gnash or nibble. Have you ever had someone suspect you of the worst, Mr. Biney? It's a hard, heavy thing, and the heaviest part was Malcolm had no idea what to do about it. All he could do was wait. He couldn't even nibble his whiskers. They were already stubs. Monday morning came and Amelia bounced in. She set a heavy book on their table. "Malcolm, I brought you something. Look, it's a dictionary." Her dark eyes shone. Malcolm could barely lift his head and squeak a greeting. Still no word from the Academy. Surely if they had found Aggie, she would tell them what had happened, right? That of all the dumb things Malcolm had done, hurting Aggie hadn't been one of them. But the Academy's silence must mean they hadn't found Aggie. Or worse, maybe they had, but they hadn't found her fast enough. Amelia frowned and tapped on Malcolm's cage. "Malcolm, what's wrong?" Malcolm didn't know how to begin to answer, but he didn't have to, because then you came in, Mr. Biney. And in spite of his own feelings, Malcolm's ears perked up. "No offense, Mr. Biney, but you were positively disheveled. Your hair stuck up not only in the back, but all over, and you looked like you hadn't slept all weekend either. Even Jovan stopped flicking chunks of playground mud at Amelia. Whoa, Mr. Biney." You ran your hand through your hair and took a rattled breath. "Jovan, class, good morning. You know, I've been thinking." The class inhaled all at once. We had never seen you so frazzled before, Mr. Biney. We were imagining the worst. The principal had outlawed recess for fifth graders for the rest of the school year, maybe. Or you were going to be fired because our math test scores were so abysmal. Ooh, that's a tricky word. Abysmal. Horrible. Maybe even that your house was hit by a meteor and you are now radioactive. It's time we clean our desks. Aw, man. You probably couldn't tell our relief with all the groaning. You held up your hands. I know. But we've got a lot of special events coming up. Parent-teacher conferences, kindergarten buddies, and the Dedication Day Carnival. As fifth graders, we are the leaders and role models for all of those, and we want to be fifth graders who are organized and take pride in our building, right? Well, it all starts with the inside of your desks. Around the room, desk lids creaked open. Soon, the room looked like the meteor had hit it instead of your house. Crumpled up spelling tests, sticky granola bar wrappers, and broken crayons messed on the floor and tabletops. Skylar found his missing retainer in Michael's lunchbox. Tiana got mad at Kara all over again by rereading 6 weeks' worth of notes. Meanwhile, you were cleaning out your desk, too, Mr. Biney, dumping drawers and shifting through confiscated slingshots, Jovan's, and paper footballs, Skylar's. Amelia had nothing to do during this time since technically she didn't have a desk and she was already a role model of organization. So she bit her lip and wondered, "Mr. Biney, are we looking for something in particular?" You hesitated. "Yes. Please, class, if you come across something that isn't yours, other than Skylar's retainer, please bring it up here. I'm missing a small blue box. It's velvet and square and about this big." He held his hands up and made a shape with his thumb and forefinger about the size of 2 of Skylar's paper footballs put together. Now Malcolm's ears really perked up. Malcolm knew that box. It was the one you were always peeking into after school, Mr. Biney. But you had just had it. When was that? Thursday? After school? Kira's ears perked up too. "Velvet? You mean like a jewelry box? Was that a flush on your cheeks, Mr. Biney?" "Well, yes, Kira. Now, about those notes." Meanwhile, the rest of the class started cleaning again with renewed vigor. After all, it was much more exciting to search for something than to sort out old worksheets into the recycling bin. But Amelia hadn't asked only for your sake, Mr. Biney. Now that the class was distracted, Amelia pulled out her hair elastic and scooped Malcolm out of his cage. She cracked open the dictionary and plopped Malcolm on it. "Tell me, Malcolm, tell me what's wrong." Malcolm guilty thought of her unread note. How to explain? He sniffed the dictionary. This book, as thick as Malcolm was tall, seemed to be all words. Well, most books are, I guess, but this one wasn't a story. It was about words, lists and lists of words. Any word Malcolm could want, any word Malcolm could need. Slowly, Malcolm extended a foot. Saturday. He pawed through a few pages. Pet, disappear. And before Malcolm knew it, he was dancing over the pages, tapping, pointing, flicking, poking, stamping. The whole story, everything, the Midnight Academy, Aggie, the lie, the note, and most of all, how Aggie was gone now. And how no one knew where and how everyone thought it was his fault. Oh, it felt good telling Amelia, felt as good as a quality burp that eases an overnashed stomach. Malcolm finished and stared up at Amelia. He panted. His feet were slick with sweat. Throughout it all, Amelia had been quiet, simply listening. Have you ever known a person like that, Mr. Biney? Someone who just listens? Someone who doesn't interrupt or pipe in with their opinion or wince at your dumb mistakes? Anyway, it's one of the most wonderful and satisfying things to have. And Amelia listening like that made Malcolm know. Know with a capital K. No matter what Honey Bunny said, no matter the rules of the Midnight Academy, Malcolm hadn't been wrong. Amelia was his friend, and if you can't tell your friends things that are making you feel all tangled up inside as a kindergartner's shoelace, well, then what good are friends? Malcolm got a sip of water. Then Amelia broke off a piece of graham cracker for him and finally spoke. Well, I know you're not asking me what to do, but if you care to know, it's quite simple, really. You've got to find out for yourself where Aggie is and what happened. Malcolm put down the graham. Amelia had spoken the very thing he had longed to do, help Aggie. But what could an undersized rat do? Amelia leaned closer and continued. Don't you see? That's the only way for the Academy to believe you about any of it. Sure, you could wait here and maybe they'd figure it out, but you'd still be a rat who lied. And what if you don't find her? You'll always be under suspicion. Malcolm considered. He stretched out his paw. What if I no find? Amelia shrugged. You won't be any worse off then, will you? She settled into her chair, her eyes gleaming. Now, you must have some ideas about what happened. Malcolm nibbled the graham. He had had a lot of time to think over the weekend, and all he could think about was the cat with the dusty, dry voice and the deadly breath to match it. Snip. How Aggie had hissed at her. How she had refused to come to the floor where Aggie was. How Aggie, even Honey Bunny, had said she was up to something. Was taking Aggie it, or was there more? A shout made Amelia and Malcolm jump. Hey, Mr. Biney, is this it? Jovan asked, pointing to a bookshelf near Malcolm's cage. Tucked at the back, on top of a row of books, was a small blue box. The small blue box you had opened and closed so many times before and after school. Yes! You strode over to the shelf in 2 steps. Mr. Biney. How'd it get over here? Thanks, Jovan. Good eyes. Okay, the rest of you, 2-minute warning. Finish up and be ready for math. You scooped the box up, Mr. Biney. But before you shoved it in your pocket, you couldn't help peeking in it. You'd done it so many times before, only this time you stopped in your tracks and your mouth fell open. Malcolm didn't know why at the time, but I know you do, Mr. Biney. And again, for the sake of the story, Malcolm's story and what happens later on, I'll write it here. The box was empty. Uh-oh. What kind of box was that? Why was it so important to Mr. Biney? Have you ever seen a box that looked like that before? Comment below. Predict what you think is going to happen next. That whole chapter focused on the box. Hope you enjoyed chapter 11. Tune in tomorrow for chapter 12 called A Spy from Above. Have a wonderful day.